Hi, this is Kirk, the bariatric carnivore. Well, it's another week and another stupid study came out in today's paper, this time claiming that, hey, eating too much protein is going to destroy your heart. Well, let's take a look at this a little bit further. It's from the University of Pittsburgh. And look, here's one of my biases. And I do have a very strong bias on this one. I'll admit it up front. If I see it in the popular press, I don't really think they know what the heck they're talking about. So I don't try to get most of my health news from headlines in today's paper. But oftentimes there are interesting clues. So when you take a look at this story, when I dug into it a little bit further, what I realized is, this experiment really doesn't support the conclusion. Number one, they really didn't do what we would call science by any stretch of the imagination. They didn't take one group of people, give them a lot of protein, one group cut their protein, followed them for a number of years, see who died of a heart attack. That's not what this study did. What it did was they first of all looked at, okay, what is what they call the NHANES data, or the big data sets that they can get. And based on food frequency questionnaires, which is a horrible way of determining truth because people don't really do that great a job on them. They've been proven to be completely ineffective and not really true measures of what people eat. But, if you look at that and kind of compare it to cardiovascular risk, that's what created their hypothesis that there may be a link between too much protein and heart. And then they decided to do some cell studies, which is they took some arteries, put them in an auger, kept them alive, and added in additional protein. The cells produced some anti-inflammatory chemicals as a result of the protein being added to the suspension that was keeping it alive, and therefore they said, well, maybe this happens in the human body, therefore protein is dangerous. The problem with this is, look, there's a difference between how a cell behaves outside the body and how it behaves inside the body, because you're a chemical factory. I mean, your body is constantly utilizing things in ways that don't always work the same in the laboratory. So if you eat sugar, well, you're going to get what's called an insulin response. Basically, you're putting glucose into your system. The pancreas releases insulin, trying to stabilize the blood sugar. But if you inject glucose directly into the arteries, you don't get the same response. The pancreas doesn't kick in because that's not the way the human body was designed. And when you put strange things into a cell culture outside of the body, it's not going to react the same way. And that's why the conclusion got off. Now, any reporter that was actually doing reporting, not just regurgitating the press release or just talking to the scientist, but instead looking into this a little bit, if they'd taken a second and Googled it, they would have realized, okay, if you decrease the amount of protein in your body, is there a downside? And yeah, there is. It's called sarcopenia and loss of bone. These are real dangerous things, and your body's ability to absorb protein goes down pretty dramatically as you get older. So if you want to maintain muscle mass, if you want to maintain strong bones, you need more protein as you get older, not less. So taking the idea of protein and reducing it just to protect you from atherosclerotic risk or risk of a heart disease actually starts to create a host of other problems. And nobody asks that question in any of the stories that I looked at. What happens to you if you reduce the amount of protein to your body? Simple question. Nobody bothered asking it. And that's kind of the problem when you look at a lot of these type of stories. They're taking things in isolation, not looking at the big picture, and not trying to optimize your health. And that's the bigger question. Now, look, here's another question is, how do you know what's true? How do you figure out, when all this sea of information, what do you really need to pay attention to? Well, this is kind of the test that I use. Number one is, first of all, plain old common sense. If somebody tells me that clapping their hands 3 times a day is the secret to living to be 100, that's quackery. I mean, that there's no mechanism that just doesn't, devoid of common sense, you can just flat out ignore it. Well, if they suggest something that actually does maybe make some mechanistic sense, then let's take a look into it a little bit further. What do the scientists say? What are the other what are the other mechanisms that are involved in it? Okay, if that checks out, then start looking around for anecdotal. People's opinion counts. How does this work for them? And if people are not seeing any result at all, then you can pretty much ignore it, because it's not creating real change. But this is how I kind of went into low carb. The first thing I heard was Dr. Stephen Phinney talking about it. Dr. Stephen Phinney's, serious scientist. He's got his degrees from MIT and Stanford. Serious guy. He made a great case and explained the mechanisms. Okay, that makes sense. And then started digging a little bit further into it, and other science kind of agreed with it. And then I started looking at, well, how does it work for other people? Having fantastic results, as far as changing people's metabolic health, getting them off of insulin, getting rid of type 2 diabetes, ending inflammation, etc. Okay, now it's looking a little bit more interesting, where you're starting to see real positive change that goes along with what the science suggests might actually be a real mechanism of action. The next step is test it yourself, on yourself. And look, when you're trying to make a lifestyle change, when you're trying to new supplement or anything like that, trying to keep that one variable down at a time, and you're going to have to give it about 3 months. It takes about 3 months to see if something is really working or not. So when you're making a dietary change and you're trying low carb or you're trying carnivore, give it about 3 months to see what the real effects are going to be on you. And if it's working and it's creating the change that you want to see and it's safe, now you've got something that you can utilize in your life, and it's true for you. Look, we're all a little bit different. Your experience does count. I mean, there are people that have switched to a vegan diet. And frankly, if they are switching from a standard American diet with lots of junk food and they are now eating whole foods, I think they're going to have some positive results for a few months. But in about a year, they're going to start having some nutritional deficiencies and they're going to start seeing problems. But, at least initially, they're going to be feeling pretty darn good. They're going to feel more energetic because they've gotten rid of the junk food. They're no longer creating these big spikes in their insulin. And they're generally going to be healthier for a while. But sooner or later, the lack of meat is going to come up and catch up with them. I'm kind of curious. I've been doing carnivore now for going on 4 years. And I'm going to be very curious, to see if there's going to be long-term downstream effects. But frankly, I'm not seeing it. Keep getting stronger, putting on more muscle. And my blood markers have remained really good. So, my N of 1 experience does count for me. I don't mind sharing it with others because I think it's a reproducible thing, because there's other people doing it too. And I think the science makes sense. So when you're trying to figure these things out for yourself, just realize it isn't easy. The system is not looking after you. You can't get health advice from the front page of the daily newspaper. Matter of fact, you can't get it from the TV news because, frankly, they're kind of bought and paid for by Big Pharma, and they're not really interested in making you healthy. And you're not going to get much information from Big Food, and you're not going to be getting it from the government because their mission is to sell agricultural products, which is mostly, unfortunately, out there for Big Food who wants more processed food. The system's really rigged against you. So your only solution is to realize that you're all alone. You're it. You're the only one who can figure this out for you. But we can all be alone in this together, and we can figure out a lot of this stuff by working together, sharing information. And that's what this channel is about. So if you like this message, please hit the like and subscribe button. Leave comments down below. Help me to expand this reach of this channel. And I try to put out a couple messages each week. I will talk to you again soon.